Oh, okay.
Matt, hello. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. We've got a room full of people here tonight at the Now Kalamazoo Voters Forum. And why don't we start by telling everybody who you are?
I'm Matt Leininger. I run the Center for Democracy Innovation at the National Civic League. And I'm also from Kalamazoo originally. I graduated from Lloyd High School in 1988. I don't have family in the area anymore, but I do have fond memories of being in Kalamazoo as a kid.
Great. And you mentioned your work with the National Civic League. Why don't you tell everybody about the National Civic League, what it is, and what you do?
Sure. The League is one of America's oldest good governance organizations. It was founded in 1894 by Teddy Roosevelt and Louis Brandeis. And it was founded at a time when democracy was not doing very well. And part of the reason to have the League, to found the League, was to figure out what sorts of innovations we could plug into our systems of government at every level, local, state, and federal, to make democracy better. So that kind of was part of that whole era of innovations and reforms, which led to all kinds of new things like the city manager form of government, the ballot initiative and referendum process, all kinds of things that changed our systems and have served us well, actually, for 100 years. Now, though, they're getting old. They need an upgrade. And so the kind of the question of the Civic League today and the center that I run is what sorts of innovations can we plug into our systems of government to make democracy work better for people at all those levels?
Interesting. Can you describe maybe briefly for people some of those innovations? What kinds of things, what new techniques or changes are we talking about?
So there's been several waves of a democracy innovation in the last 20 or 30 years. There was a wave that had to do with kind of in-person deliberative formats. How do you get diverse sets of people in small groups to talk about issues and learn together, make decisions, make recommendations to their elected officials, figure out what they were going to do themselves. So there's a whole kind of tried and true set of processes, and they have different names. There's things like citizen assemblies and study circles and forums of various kinds, but there's ways to do them well with diverse sets of people that lead to outcomes. There's also then a whole nother set of tools, techniques, tips, platforms that emerge from the tech wave of the kind of 2000s to 2010s. So all kinds of ways people can kind of fund projects, they can contribute and rank ideas, they can link to one another in their neighborhoods. There's all kinds of stuff we can do online. There's things like participatory budgeting. There's all kinds of stuff now. The problem with that in the US is that almost all of those things are kind of separate from the systems. They're presented as kind of, here's a project, here's a cool process, or here's an app, and they don't really work as well on their own. They need to be part of a system. They need to complement each other better, and that's why the U.S. has fallen behind other countries when it comes to democracy innovation, because we just have been experimenting without actually using the results of those experiments.
I see. So through your work, you are interfacing with learning about cities and county, other local governments all around the country. I imagine that's a very interesting perspective. I'm wondering, based on your knowledge of Kalamazoo, what do you think, again, in the context of all these other places that you're seeing, what do you think about our particular assets? What do you think about our
Hmm.
particular risks and things like that? How do you think we're situated?
Well, I mean, I'm obviously speaking at this point as an outsider. Haven't lived in Kalamazoo for a very long time. But from what I do know, I mean, that you have a number of assets. I've met over the years a number of people in local government who are doing all kinds of interesting things, strategic planning, and all kinds of stuff within government. There are groups like Now Kalamazoo, which is kind of taking on the civic media side of things. There certainly seem to be assets. There's people in Western Michigan doing all kinds of interesting stuff. And so there's plenty of people and examples, I think, to pull from. Part of the question is, and this is true of almost all communities, how do we get all that work together? How do we kind of think about civic health, our civic infrastructure, our democracy as a whole, kind of figure what's working well, what deserves to be scaled up more, what are the gaps, and work together kind of across those sectors to have a plan for, strengthening local democracy.
Right. So we're asking everybody here at the event tonight the same thing I'm going to ask you. When it comes to this election cycle, you know, what do you want? What are the outcomes you're hoping to see? And on the other hand, what are the things that have you a little bit worried?
Well, let me start with the worries first. Get the bad news out of the way. I mean, I think part of the problem, and I think this is a lot of people are feeling this, is that the choices we're being given, and this is not just this election cycle, but most of them are kind of choices between people saying, you know, hey, let's kind of keep the system as it is. Let's save democracy without acknowledging that it could be improved. And then people are saying, forget it, we don't need this anymore. You know, we want some other, you know, not even a system, but some other way of doing this. And that's a false choice. And it's a very discouraging choice for people, most people, especially if you're a new voter or a young voter or someone who doesn't really feel like this stuff affects you. So that's my worry, is that people won't vote when they're, you know, faced with these choices that don't seem that gratifying to them. And if we don't vote, you know, we're just going back. I mean, voting is the one fundamental role that we have these days in American democracy. It's not the only one we could have, but it's the one we've got. And if we kind of abandon it, then we're going back. So my hope is that we get past this false choice and that candidates at all levels talk about how they want to give people a meaningful voice in decision making. You know, not just the candidates giving their stands on issues, that's important, but how am I going to allow you, the voter, to become more informed, to talk to your neighbors, to meet with people who don't agree with you, to come up with plans and ideas and things that you want to do as a volunteer, or things you want your city council or your school board to do. That's what candidates should be talking about, how they're going to give people better roles in democracy. And I'm hoping more of that happens, and I hope that we come out through this election with more of that kind of energy for people saying, okay, democracy is not in good shape, but there's a bunch of stuff we can do to improve.
That's fantastic. Matt, thank you so much for joining us at the Voters Forum this evening, and can't thank you enough.
Sure.
We'll talk to you later.
Great talking with you.
All right, bye-bye.